Urban exploration was my sanctuary, a retreat from the chaos of daily life. I found solace in the silence of forgotten places, where the echoes of the past whispered through crumbling walls and broken windows. It was in these abandoned spaces that I felt most alive, piecing together the stories of what once was. Clara and I had been together for 10 years. We met through mutual friends at a party, bonding over our shared sense of adventure. Our connection deepened after a tragic accident took the life of our closest friend, Alex. The loss left us both shattered, and in the aftermath, we clung to each other, finding comfort in our shared grief. Those early years were a blur of late-night conversations, impromptu road trips, and shared dreams. Clara was everything I could have wanted in a partner: smart, funny, and adventurous. She was a private investigator, a job that suited her inquisitive nature perfectly. She had a knack for uncovering secrets, a skill I admired, even if it sometimes made me uneasy. Despite her demanding job, she made time for my peculiar hobby. At first, she was hesitant about joining me on my urban explorations, but soon enough, she was right there beside me, marveling at the beauty of decay. Our favorite spot was an old textile mill on the outskirts of the city. It was a sprawling complex, long abandoned and forgotten by most. The walls were covered in graffiti, and nature had begun to reclaim the space, with vines creeping through broken windows and cracks in the concrete. We spent hours there, exploring every nook and cranny, imagining the lives of the workers who once toiled within its walls. It was our secret hideaway, a place where we could escape from the world and just be together. But as the years passed, things began to change. Clara became more distant, wrapped up in her work. She started spending more time away from home, coming back late at night with vague explanations. Our once lively conversations dwindled to awkward silences, and I could feel the growing chasm between us. I tried to reach out to understand what was going on, but she brushed off my concerns, insisting that everything was fine. I wanted to believe her, but there was a nagging feeling in the back of my mind that something was terribly wrong. I started noticing little things: a missed call from an unknown number, a hurried text message that she quickly deleted. It wasn't like Clara to be secretive, and it made me uneasy. I tried to push the thoughts aside, convincing myself that I was just being paranoid. After all, we had been through so much together. Our bond was strong, unbreakable. Or so I thought. The day I discovered the truth started like any other. Clara had left early for work, and I decided to spend the day exploring a new location I had heard about, a defunct power plant on the edge of town. I spent hours wandering through the abandoned facility, taking photographs and collecting small artifacts to add to my growing collection. By the time I got home, it was late afternoon, and Clara's car was already in the driveway. I walked into the house, expecting to find her in the kitchen or the living room, but it was empty. I called out her name, but there was no response. As I headed upstairs, I noticed her phone lying on the kitchen counter, buzzing with a new message. Clara was usually meticulous about keeping her phone with her, and it struck me as odd that she had left it behind. Curiosity got the better of me, and I picked it up, intending to take it to her. That's when I saw the message. It was from a number I didn't recognize, and the preview on the screen was enough to make my heart drop. "Can't wait to see you again tonight. Last night was amazing." My hands trembled as I unlocked her phone, scrolling through the conversation. The messages were explicit, detailing an affair that had been going on for months. My world shattered in that instant, the ground beneath me giving way. Clara walked into the room just as I put her phone down. She saw the look on my face and froze. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was deafening. I held up her phone, the screen still displaying the incriminating messages. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't deny it. Instead, she sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "Mark, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I never meant for this to happen." "How long?" I demanded, struggling to keep my emotions in check. 6 months, she admitted. "I met him through work. It started off innocent, but then it just happened. I felt trapped, and he was an escape." "An escape from what?" I asked, anger and hurt warring within me. "From us? From me?" "It's not that simple," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I love you, Mark. I always have. But I felt like I was losing myself. The job, the pressure, everything. I didn't know how to tell you." Her words felt like knives, each one twisting deeper into the wound. "You could have talked to me," I said, my voice breaking. "We could have figured it out together. But you chose to lie, to cheat." "I'm sorry," she repeated, but the words felt hollow. "I never wanted to hurt you." I couldn't stand to look at her anymore. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I left the house that night, unable to stay in the home we had built together. The place that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a prison, its walls closing in around me. I drove aimlessly for hours, replaying the events of the past few months in my mind. Every missed call, every late night, every awkward silence, it all made sense now. The signs had been there all along, but I had been too blind to see them. I ended up at the old textile mill, our secret hideaway. As I wandered through the familiar halls, memories of happier times flooded back. This place, with all its decay and ruin, felt like a reflection of my soul. I sat on the cold concrete floor, staring at the graffiti-covered walls, and let the tears come. The pain was overwhelming, but in that moment, I vowed to find a way through it. I didn't know how, but I knew I had to start somewhere. Clara's betrayal had left a gaping hole in my heart, but I was determined not to let it destroy me. This was the beginning of the end, but also, perhaps, the start of something new. The days following my discovery of Clara's affair were a blur. The shock of her betrayal left me numb, and I struggled to find a sense of normalcy in my now upended life. I couldn't bear to stay in our house, filled with memories that now felt tainted. Instead, I found myself wandering the city, losing track of time in the labyrinth of its streets and abandoned buildings. Clara moved out within a week, taking only the essentials. We barely spoke. The few conversations we had were strained and painful, filled with apologies that did little to mend the wounds. Each word felt like a reminder of what we had lost, and I could see the same anguish reflected in her eyes. I returned to the textile mill often, seeking solace in its familiar decay. It had always been a place of refuge, a sanctuary where the past whispered through every crack and crevice. Now, it felt like the only constant in my life. The silence of the mill allowed me to think, to process the whirlwind of emotions raging inside me. One afternoon, as I roamed the mill's vast halls, I noticed a peculiar marking on one of the walls. It was a small symbol, a series of interlocking circles. I had seen it before but never paid much attention. Curious, I began to explore further, tracing the symbol's appearances throughout the mill. They seemed to lead somewhere, forming a path that I had never noticed before. Following the symbols, I found myself in a part of the mill that I rarely ventured into. It was darker here, the air heavy with the scent of mildew and neglect. As I turned a corner, I came upon a small, hidden room. Inside, I found remnants of a life long forgotten. Old newspapers, a rusted typewriter, and photographs of people I didn't recognize. One photograph caught my eye. It was of a young woman standing in front of the mill, her expression somber yet determined. Something about her face seemed familiar, but I couldn't place it. As I studied the photo, I felt a strange sense of connection, as if the past and present were intertwining in ways I couldn't yet understand. Returning home that evening, I placed the photograph on my desk, next to the collection of artifacts I had amassed over the years. Each item told a story, a fragment of history preserved through time. I wondered what story this photograph held and why it seemed to resonate with me so deeply. In the following weeks, I immersed myself in my work, using it as a distraction from the pain. I started creating art from the materials I collected during my explorations. Rusted metal, broken glass, splintered wood. Each piece became a part of a larger narrative, a way to channel my emotions into something tangible. The creative process was cathartic. As I welded and sculpted, I felt a sense of purpose returning. The art became a reflection of my journey, a means of making sense of the chaos. It was during one of these late-night sessions that I met Mr. Grayson. I was working in my makeshift studio, a small rented space filled with tools and debris, when I heard a knock on the door. Opening it, I found an elderly man with a kind face and curious eyes. "Hello, I'm Mr. Grayson," he introduced himself. "I'm a historian, and I've been studying the history of this area. I noticed your work and was intrigued." I invited him in, and we spent hours talking about the city's history and my explorations. Mr. Grayson was a wealth of knowledge, his passion for the past evident in every word. He was particularly interested in the textile mill and the photograph I had found. "That symbol you followed," he said, examining the photograph. "It's part of an old society that used to operate in secret, documenting the city's forgotten places. This woman," he pointed to the photo, "was one of their members." I listened, fascinated, as he recounted the society's mission. They believed that every place had a story, a history worth preserving. They used symbols to mark significant sites, creating a hidden map of the city's past. The more we talked, the more I realized how little I knew about Clara's investigation work. She had always been secretive, but I never imagined the depths of her involvement. I wondered if her affair was somehow connected to this hidden society. Mr. Grayson's visits became a regular occurrence. He brought old documents and maps, shedding light on the mill's history and its significance. Our conversations helped me see the bigger picture, and I began to understand that the decay I found so fascinating was part of a larger narrative. One evening, as we pored over a particularly detailed map, Mr. Grayson shared a revelation. "I think Clara was investigating this society," he said. "Her work as a private investigator likely brought her into contact with their remnants. This affair, there may be more to it than we realize." His words struck a chord. Could Clara's double life have been more than just an escape? Was it possible that her affair was tied to something larger, something rooted in the city's forgotten past? I decided to confront Clara. I needed answers, not just for my own peace of mind, but to understand the full scope of what had happened. We agreed to meet at a cafe we used to frequent, a neutral ground where we could talk openly. Seeing her again was difficult. The pain was still fresh, but I was determined to get to the bottom of things. "Clara," I began, "I need to know the truth. Was your affair connected to your investigation work? To the symbols and the society Mr. Grayson told me about?" She looked surprised but didn't hesitate. "Yes," she admitted. "I was investigating the society. My affair. His name is Tom. He was my contact, someone who had ties to the group. I got in too deep, and it became more than just work. I'm sorry, Mark. I never wanted to hurt you." Her confession was a bittersweet relief. It didn't erase the pain, but it provided context. Clara's betrayal wasn't just a personal failure. It was part of a larger story, one that I was now entangled in. As I walked away from the cafe, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The cracks in our foundation had been there all along, but now I could see them for what they were. This was the beginning of a new journey, one where I would uncover the hidden stories of the past and, perhaps, find a way to heal. My nights were restless, filled with fragmented dreams and a gnawing sense of unfinished business. Clara's confession had given me some answers, but it had also raised more questions. My mind kept returning to the photograph of the young woman and the hidden society that Clara had been investigating. There was something there, a connection waiting to be uncovered. Determined to find closure, I delved deeper into the history of the textile mill and the society that had once operated in secret. Mr. Grayson became my guide, providing me with documents, maps, and his vast knowledge. Together, we started to piece together the puzzle. One morning, as we sifted through a stack of old papers, Mr. Grayson handed me a faded ledger. "This might be of interest," he said. "It's a record of the society's activities, their explorations, and the significant sites they marked." The ledger was a treasure trove of information. It detailed the society's missions, the locations they explored, and the symbols they used to mark important findings. As I read through the entries, I felt a growing sense of connection. These explorers were kindred spirits, seeking to uncover the hidden stories of the city, just as I did. One entry, in particular, caught my eye. It mentioned a hidden room within the textile mill, used as a meeting place for the society's members. The description matched the room where I had found the photograph. There was also a list of names, members of the society, and one name stood out, Margaret Holloway. It was the name of the young woman in the photograph. Who was Margaret Holloway? I asked Mr. Grayson. She was one of the society's founding members, he replied. A brilliant historian and urban explorer. Her work was instrumental in documenting many of the city's forgotten places. I spent the next few days researching Margaret Holloway, uncovering fragments of her life and work. She had been a pioneer in urban exploration, dedicated to preserving the history of the city's abandoned buildings. Her passion mirrored my own, and I felt a strange kinship with her. As I dug deeper, I discovered that Margaret's life had been marred by tragedy. She had lost her family in a fire when she was just a child, an event that had driven her to explore the city's ruins, seeking solace in the remnants of the past. Her story resonated with me, echoing the loss and grief that had shaped my own journey. One evening, while going through a box of old photographs, I found another picture of Margaret. This time, she was standing with a group of people, all members of the society. Among them was a man who looked strikingly familiar. It took me a moment to place him, but then it hit me. Tom, the man Clara had been involved with. I stared at the photograph, my mind racing. What was Tom's connection to the society? And how had he come to be involved with Clara? I needed answers, and I knew there was only one person who could provide them. I arranged to meet Tom at a small, out-of-the-way diner. He agreed, though I could sense his reluctance. When he walked in, I saw a man who was both confident and cautious, a man who had lived many lives. We sat at a corner booth, the hum of conversation around us providing a semblance of privacy. "Mark," he began, "I'm not sure what Clara told you, but I'll do my best to answer your questions." "I appreciate that," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I need to know about the society and your connection to it. And I need to understand how it all ties back to Clara." Tom sighed, rubbing his temples. "The society, it's more than just a group of urban explorers. It's a network, a way for people to connect with the city's hidden history. My grandfather was a member, and I grew up hearing stories about their adventures. When I met Clara, she was already investigating the society. I was her contact, her guide into this world." "So, the affair?" I prompted. "It started as work," he admitted, "but it became more. We were both searching for something, trying to escape our own demons. For Clara, it was about understanding her past. For me, it was about continuing my grandfather's legacy." I took a deep breath, absorbing his words. "Did you ever care about her?" I asked, the question laced with pain. "Yes," he said softly, "but it was complicated. Our relationship was built on secrets and lies." "I'm sorry, Mark. I never intended for it to cause so much pain." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. I realized that Clara's involvement with the society was her way of dealing with her own struggles, just as my urban exploration was for me. It didn't excuse her betrayal, but it gave me a new perspective. As we parted ways, Tom handed me a small, leather-bound journal. "This belonged to Margaret Holloway," he said. "I think you'll find it helpful." I spent the next few days poring over Margaret's journal. Her entries were a mix of exploration notes, personal reflections, and sketches of the places she visited. Through her words, I felt her passion, her pain, and her unwavering dedication to preserving the past. One entry stood out. It was dated a few months before her death, and it detailed a hidden chamber within the textile mill, a place she believed held the key to understanding the society's true purpose. Intrigued, I decided to find this chamber, hoping it would provide the closure I needed. Returning to the mill, I followed Margaret's directions, navigating the maze of corridors and staircases. Finally, I found the chamber, a small, concealed room hidden behind a false wall. Inside, I discovered a collection of artifacts, documents, and photographs, all meticulously preserved. Among the items was a letter from Margaret, addressed to future explorers. She spoke of the importance of remembering the past, of honoring the stories of those who came before. Her words resonated deeply, and I felt a sense of peace washing over me. Margaret's legacy had given me the answers I sought, but more importantly, it had given me a new purpose. I realized that my journey was not just about uncovering the past, but about finding my own path forward. As I left the mill that day, I felt a renewed sense of determination. Clara's betrayal had left scars, but it had also led me to a deeper understanding of myself and the world around me. I was ready to embrace the future, one step at a time. After my conversation with Tom, I felt a strange mix of clarity and confusion. The revelations about Clara and the hidden society had provided some answers, but they also left me with a lingering sense of emptiness. The threads of my old life were unraveling, and I struggled to find a way to weave them into something new. I continued my urban explorations, losing myself in the silent ruins of the city. There was something therapeutic about walking through these abandoned spaces, where the echoes of the past whispered their secrets. Each building had its own story, a narrative of decay and renewal that mirrored my own journey. One particularly cold and dreary morning, I found myself drawn to an old, dilapidated factory on the outskirts of town. It was a massive structure, its once grand facade now crumbling and overgrown with ivy. I had passed by it many times before, but had never ventured inside. Today, it seemed to call to me. As I stepped through the broken doorway, the smell of dust and mildew filled my nostrils. The interior was dark, the only light filtering through cracks in the walls and ceiling. I carefully navigated the debris-strewn floor, my footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. The factory had been abandoned for decades, its machinery long since rusted and decayed. I wandered through the main hall, taking photographs and collecting small objects that caught my eye. An old wrench here, a piece of shattered glass there. Each item was a fragment of history, a piece of the puzzle I was trying to assemble. In the back corner of the factory, I discovered a small office, its door hanging off its hinges. Inside, I found a desk covered in dust and papers scattered across the floor. I sifted through the documents, my curiosity piqued. Most were mundane, old invoices, work orders, and blueprints. But one piece of paper stood out. It was a letter, yellowed with age, addressed to someone named Henry. The letter spoke of hard times, of the struggle to keep the factory running and the toll it was taking on the workers. There was a sense of desperation in the words, a plea for help that had gone unanswered. As I read the letter, I felt a pang of empathy. The struggles of the past seemed to mirror my own, the sense of being abandoned and alone in a world that no longer made sense. The factory, like me, had been left to decay, its stories forgotten by time. I spent hours in that office, lost in thought. The letter had touched something deep within me, a reminder that I was not alone in my struggles. The past was filled with people who had faced their own challenges, who had fought to survive in the face of adversity. As the day turned to dusk, I decided to leave the factory, but not before taking the letter with me. It felt like a token, a connection to the people who had once worked there. I carefully folded it and placed it in my bag, alongside the other artifacts I had collected. Walking back to my car, I felt a sense of determination. The stories of the past had given me a new perspective, a reminder that life was about resilience and renewal. Clara's betrayal had left scars, but it had also led me to a deeper understanding of myself and the world around me. Back at my studio, I spread out my collection of artifacts on the workbench. The wrench, the glass, the letter. They were all pieces of a larger narrative, fragments of a story waiting to be told. I began to work on a new sculpture, using the materials I had gathered to create something that reflected my journey. As I welded and shaped the metal, I felt a sense of purpose returning. The creative process was my way of making sense of the chaos, of transforming the pain into something beautiful. The sculpture took shape slowly, each piece fitting together to form a cohesive whole. One evening, as I was putting the finishing touches on the sculpture, I heard a knock on the door. I opened it to find Jake, a fellow urban explorer I had met a few months ago. He was a kindred spirit, someone who understood the allure of abandoned places and the stories they held. "Hey, Mark," he said, stepping inside. "I heard you were working on something new. Mind if I take a look?" One evening, while going through a box of old photographs, I found another picture of Margaret. This time, she was standing with a group of people, all members of the society. Among them was a man who looked strikingly familiar. It took me a moment to place him, but then it hit me, Tom, the man Clara had been involved with. I stared at the photograph, my mind racing. What was Tom's connection to the society? And how had he come to be involved with Clara? I needed answers, and I knew there was only one person who could provide them. I arranged to meet Tom at a small, out-of-the-way diner. He agreed, though I could sense his reluctance. When he walked in, I saw a man who was both confident and cautious, a man who had lived many lives. We sat at a corner booth, the hum of conversation around us providing a semblance of privacy. "Mark," he began, "I'm not sure what Clara told you, but I'll do my best to answer your questions." "I appreciate that," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I need to know about the society and your connection to it. And I need to understand how it all ties back to Clara." Tom sighed, rubbing his temples. "The society, it's more than just a group of urban explorers. It's a network, a way for people to connect with the city's hidden history. My grandfather was a member, and I grew up hearing stories about their adventures. When I met Clara, she was already investigating the society. I was her contact, her guide into this world." "So, the affair?" I prompted. "It started as work," he admitted, "but it became more. We were both searching for something, trying to escape our own demons. For Clara, it was about understanding her past. For me, it was about continuing my grandfather's legacy." I took a deep breath, absorbing his words. "Did you ever care about her?" I asked, the question laced with pain. "Yes," he said softly, "but it was complicated. Our relationship was built on secrets and lies." "I'm sorry, Mark. I never intended for it to cause so much pain." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. I realized that Clara's involvement with the society was her way of dealing with her own struggles, just as my urban exploration was for me. It didn't excuse her betrayal, but it gave me a new perspective. As we parted ways, Tom handed me a small, leather-bound journal. "This belonged to Margaret Holloway," he said. "I think you'll find it helpful." I spent the next few days poring over Margaret's journal. Her entries were a mix of exploration notes, personal reflections, and sketches of the places she visited. Through her words, I felt her passion, her pain, and her unwavering dedication to preserving the past. One entry stood out. It was dated a few months before her death, and it detailed a hidden chamber within the textile mill, a place she believed held the key to understanding the society's true purpose. Intrigued, I decided to find this chamber, hoping it would provide the closure I needed. Returning to the mill, I followed Margaret's directions, navigating the maze of corridors and staircases. Finally, I found the chamber, a small, concealed room hidden behind a false wall. Inside, I discovered a collection of artifacts, documents, and photographs, all meticulously preserved. Among the items was a letter from Margaret, addressed to future explorers. She spoke of the importance of remembering the past, of honoring the stories of those who came before. Her words resonated deeply, and I felt a sense of peace washing over me. Margaret's legacy had given me the answers I sought, but more importantly, it had given me a new purpose. I realized that my journey was not just about uncovering the past, but about finding my own path forward. As I left the mill that day, I felt a renewed sense of determination. Clara's betrayal had left scars, but it had also led me to a deeper understanding of myself and the world around me. I was ready to embrace the future, one step at a time. After my conversation with Tom, I felt a strange mix of clarity and confusion. The revelations about Clara and the hidden society had provided some answers, but they also left me with a lingering sense of emptiness. The threads of my old life were unraveling, and I struggled to find a way to weave them into something new. I continued my urban explorations, losing myself in the silent ruins of the city. There was something therapeutic about walking through these abandoned spaces, where the echoes of the past whispered their secrets. Each building had its own story, a narrative of decay and renewal that mirrored my own journey. One particularly cold and dreary morning, I found myself drawn to an old, dilapidated factory on the outskirts of town. It was a massive structure, its once grand facade now crumbling and overgrown with ivy. I had passed by it many times before, but had never ventured inside. Today, it seemed to call to me. As I stepped through the broken doorway, the smell of dust and mildew filled my nostrils. The interior was dark, the only light filtering through cracks in the walls and ceiling. I carefully navigated the debris-strewn floor, my footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. The factory had been abandoned for decades, its machinery long since rusted and decayed. I wandered through the main hall, taking photographs and collecting small objects that caught my eye. An old wrench here, a piece of shattered glass there. Each item was a fragment of history, a piece of the puzzle I was trying to assemble. In the back corner of the factory, I discovered a small office, its door hanging off its hinges. Inside, I found a desk covered in dust and papers scattered across the floor. I sifted through the documents, my curiosity piqued. Most were mundane, old invoices, work orders, and blueprints. But one piece of paper stood out. It was a letter, yellowed with age, addressed to someone named Henry. The letter spoke of hard times, of the struggle to keep the factory running and the toll it was taking on the workers. There was a sense of desperation in the words, a plea for help that had gone unanswered. As I read the letter, I felt a pang of empathy. The struggles of the past seemed to mirror my own, the sense of being abandoned and alone in a world that no longer made sense. The factory, like me, had been left to decay, its stories forgotten by time. I spent hours in that office, lost in thought. The letter had touched something deep within me, a reminder that I was not alone in my struggles. The past was filled with people who had faced their own challenges, who had fought to survive in the face of adversity. As the day turned to dusk, I decided to leave the factory, but not before taking the letter with me. It felt like a token, a connection to the people who had once worked there. I carefully folded it and placed it in my bag, alongside the other artifacts I had collected. Walking back to my car, I felt a sense of determination. The stories of the past had given me a new perspective, a reminder that life was about resilience and renewal. Clara's betrayal had left scars, but it had also led me to a deeper understanding of myself and the world around me. Back at my studio, I spread out my collection of artifacts on the workbench. The wrench, the glass, the letter. They were all pieces of a larger narrative, fragments of a story waiting to be told. I began to work on a new sculpture, using the materials I had gathered to create something that reflected my journey. As I welded and shaped the metal, I felt a sense of purpose returning. The creative process was my way of making sense of the chaos, of transforming the pain into something beautiful. The sculpture took shape slowly, each piece fitting together to form a cohesive whole. One evening, as I was putting the finishing touches on the sculpture, I heard a knock on the door. I opened it to find Jake, a fellow urban explorer I had met a few months ago. He was a kindred spirit, someone who understood the allure of abandoned places and the stories they held. "Hey, Mark," he said, stepping inside. "I heard you were working on something new. Mind if I take a look?" "Not at all," I replied, stepping aside to let him in. Jake was one of the few people who truly understood my passion for urban exploration, and his support meant a lot to me. He walked over to the sculpture, studying it intently. "This is incredible," he said, a note of admiration in his voice. "You've really captured something here." "Thanks," I said, feeling a swell of pride. "It's been a way for me to process everything that's happened." Jake nodded, understanding. "It's amazing how art can do that. It's like you're taking the pain and turning it into something meaningful." We spent the next few hours talking about our explorations, sharing stories of the places we had visited and the things we had found. Jake had his own stories of heartbreak and loss, and it was comforting to know that I wasn't alone in my struggles. As the night wore on, I felt a sense of camaraderie with Jake. Our shared passion for urban exploration had brought us together, and his friendship was a reminder that I didn't have to face my journey alone. When Jake left, I returned to my workbench, feeling a renewed sense of determination. The past was filled with stories of resilience and renewal, and I was a part of that narrative. Clara's betrayal had been a turning point, but it had also led me to a deeper understanding of myself and the world around me. I finished the sculpture late that night, stepping back to admire my work. It was a reflection of my journey, a testament to the power of resilience and the beauty of renewal. As I looked at it, I felt a sense of peace washing over me. The past had left its scars, but it had also given me the strength to move forward. This was my story, a journey of discovery and healing, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. The nights were the hardest. The quiet moments when I was left alone with my thoughts, the memories of Clara and the life we had built together. It was during one of these long, sleepless nights that I found myself drawn to the pile of materials I had collected from my urban explorations. Rusted metal, shattered glass, pieces of wood, all remnants of forgotten places. I spread them out on the floor, letting my fingers trace the textures, feeling the weight of each piece. An idea began to take shape in my mind, a way to transform my pain into something tangible. I rented a small studio space, not far from my apartment. It was nothing fancy, just a room with good light and enough space for my growing collection of materials. The first few days, I spent cleaning and organizing, creating a workspace that felt like my own. I brought in my tools, welders, hammers, pliers, and set up a corner for drawing and planning. It felt good to have a project, something to focus on, a way to channel my emotions. My first piece was a sculpture made from rusted metal and broken glass. I called it Shattered Dreams. It was an abstract representation of my life with Clara, the sharp edges and twisted shapes capturing the chaos and pain I felt inside. As I worked, I found a strange sense of peace. Each cut, each weld, was a release, a way to process what had happened. The hours flew by, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Word of my work spread quickly. The local art community was intrigued by my unique style and the raw emotion behind my pieces. One evening, as I was finishing up for the day, I received a visit from Mr. Grayson. He had heard about my sculptures and wanted to see them for himself. As he walked around the studio, examining each piece, I could see the wheels turning in his mind. "These are remarkable, Mark," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "You've managed to capture something very powerful here. There's a story in each of these pieces, a journey that speaks to the heart." I nodded, grateful for his words. It's been therapeutic in a way. I needed to do something with all this pain, and this felt like the right way to express it. Mr. Grayson looked thoughtful for a moment. "You know, there's an art exhibition coming up at the local gallery. They're looking for new and innovative works. I think your pieces would be a perfect fit. It could be a great opportunity for you and a way to share your story with others." The idea of an exhibition was both exciting and terrifying. Sharing my work meant opening up about my experiences, exposing my vulnerabilities to the world. But it also felt like a necessary step, a way to move forward. I agreed to submit my work, and over the next few weeks, I poured myself into preparing for the exhibition. The day of the exhibition arrived, and I felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. The gallery was bustling with people, their voices filling the air with excitement and curiosity. As I walked through the space, I saw my sculptures displayed prominently, each piece carefully lit to highlight its details. It was surreal to see my work in such a setting, to watch as people stopped to admire and discuss it. Throughout the evening, I received a lot of positive feedback. People were drawn to the raw emotion and the unique materials I used. Many of them asked about the inspiration behind my work, and I found myself telling my story about Clara, the betrayal, and the journey that had led me to this point. It was cathartic, sharing my experiences and realizing that others could relate to my pain and healing. One of the visitors was an eccentric artist named Jake. He was known for his avant-garde installations and his bold personality. He approached me with a wide grin, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Mark, your work is incredible," he said, shaking my hand enthusiastically. "I've never seen anything quite like it. The way you've taken these discarded materials and turned them into something beautiful is truly inspiring." We struck up a conversation, and I learned that Jake had his own story of heartbreak and recovery. He shared his experiences openly, and it was refreshing to talk to someone who understood what I had been through. We exchanged contact information, and over the next few weeks, Jake became a close friend and confidant. Jake introduced me to a community of artists and urban explorers who shared our passion for uncovering hidden beauty in forgotten places. We spent countless hours exploring abandoned buildings, gathering materials, and creating art together. It was a new chapter in my life, filled with creativity, camaraderie, and healing. One day, as we were exploring an old theater, Jake found a stack of old playbills and posters. The vibrant colors and intricate designs sparked an idea, and we decided to collaborate on a new project, an installation that combined my sculptures with his multimedia art. It was an ambitious endeavor, but we were both excited about the possibilities. The installation, titled Echoes of the Past, was a huge success. It was a tribute to the stories and memories hidden within the city's abandoned spaces, a celebration of resilience and renewal. The response from the art community was overwhelmingly positive, and it felt like a validation of everything we had worked for. As I stood in the gallery, surrounded by our work and the people who had come to see it, I realized how far I had come. Clara's betrayal had been a turning point, a catalyst for a journey of self-discovery and healing. My art had become a way to process my pain, to find meaning in the chaos. And through it all, I had found new friends, a new purpose, and a new sense of hope. Looking back, I understood that the journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more discoveries, and more opportunities for growth. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face whatever came next, confident in the knowledge that I had the strength and resilience to overcome it. Urban exploration had always been my escape, but in the weeks following Clara's departure, it became a lifeline. The solitude of abandoned buildings provided a sanctuary from the pain that lingered like a persistent shadow. I roamed through forgotten spaces, gathering remnants of the past and channeling my emotions into something tangible. One afternoon, I found myself at an old industrial site on the outskirts of the city. The building had once been a hub of activity, but now it stood silent and desolate, overtaken by nature. Vines snaked through broken windows, and rust covered the machinery that had long ceased to function. It was here that I began to see the potential for something new. I had always collected small artifacts during my explorations, pieces of rusted metal, shards of broken glass, and splintered wood. But now, these fragments took on a new significance. I started to bring them back to my makeshift studio, a rented space cluttered with tools and debris. Each piece became part of a larger narrative, a means of expressing the chaos and pain I felt inside. As I welded and sculpted, I lost myself in the creative process. The act of transforming discarded materials into art was therapeutic, a way to reclaim control over my life. The studio became my refuge, a place where I could pour my emotions into my work and find a semblance of peace. One evening, as I was engrossed in a particularly challenging piece, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find Mr. Grayson standing there, his eyes alight with curiosity. "Good evening, Mark," he greeted me. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," I replied, stepping aside to let him in. "What brings you here?" "I've been thinking about your project," he said, glancing around the cluttered space. "I'd like to help, if you'll allow it." I was taken aback by his offer. Mr. Grayson had been a valuable source of information, but I hadn't expected him to take such an active interest in my art. "I'd appreciate that," I said, genuinely touched by his willingness to support me. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Grayson became a regular presence in the studio. He brought with him a wealth of knowledge, sharing stories and historical context for the artifacts I had collected. His insights added depth to my work, transforming it from a personal expression into a broader narrative about the city's forgotten history. One day, as we were working together, Mr. Grayson suggested we hold an exhibition. "Your art deserves to be seen," he said. "It's a powerful testament to the resilience of both the city and yourself." The idea of an exhibition was daunting, but it also felt right. It was a way to close a chapter of my life and share my journey with others. With Mr. Grayson's encouragement, I began to prepare for the event, selecting pieces that best represented my story. As the date of the exhibition approached, I found myself growing increasingly anxious. The thought of opening up to a room full of strangers was terrifying, but I knew it was a necessary step in my healing process. I had to confront my pain head-on, and this was the best way to do it. The night of the exhibition arrived, and the studio was transformed into a gallery. The walls were lined with my sculptures, each one telling a part of my story. The space buzzed with activity as people milled about, examining the pieces and engaging in hushed conversations. Mr. Grayson stood by my side, offering words of encouragement. "You've done something incredible here, Mark," he said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Be proud of what you've accomplished. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to address the crowd. As I began to speak, the room fell silent, all eyes on me. I shared my journey, from the pain of Clara's betrayal to the solace I found in urban exploration and art. It was a cathartic experience, and as I spoke, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. After my speech, people approached me, sharing their own stories of loss and resilience. It was heartening to see how my work had resonated with others, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Among the attendees was Jake, a fellow urban explorer I had met during one of my excursions. He had become a friend and confidant, and his presence that night meant the world to me. "Your work is amazing, Mark," Jake said, clapping me on the back. "I'm glad you decided to share it with the world." "Thanks, Jake," I replied, grateful for his support. "It's been a long journey, but I'm finally starting to feel like myself again." As the evening drew to a close, I stood in the gallery, reflecting on how far I had come. Clara's betrayal had left deep scars, but it had also set me on a path of self-discovery and growth. I realized that the pain had shaped me, but it didn't define me. I was more than my past, and I had the power to create my own future. The exhibition marked a turning point in my life. It was a celebration of resilience, a testament to the strength it takes to rebuild from the ashes. As I looked around the room, filled with people who had connected with my story, I felt a sense of closure. The chapter of Clara was behind me, and I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. With renewed determination, I continued to explore the city's hidden corners, uncovering new stories and creating art that spoke to the beauty of decay and renewal. Each piece was a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is always the possibility of transformation. The journey was far from over, but I was no longer alone. I had found a community of kindred spirits, people who understood the power of resilience and the importance of preserving the past. Together, we would continue to explore, create, and heal, finding strength in our shared experiences. As I left the gallery that night, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in months. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to face it with an open heart and a renewed sense of purpose. The city's forgotten places had given me a new lease on life, and I was determined to make the most of it. The success of the exhibition marked a turning point in my life. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of closure. I had transformed my pain into something meaningful, and in doing so, I had found a community of like-minded individuals. Among them was Jake, a fellow urban explorer whose own journey of heartbreak and healing mirrored mine in many ways. Jake and I began to spend more time together, exploring new locations and sharing stories of our past. His friendship was a lifeline, offering both companionship and a sense of understanding that I desperately needed. One sunny afternoon, we met at an old railway station that had long been abandoned. The tracks were overgrown with weeds, and the once bustling platform was now a silent relic of the past. As we wandered through the decaying structure, Jake shared his story. He had been in a long-term relationship that ended abruptly when his partner left him for someone else. Like me, he had turned to urban exploration as a way to cope with the pain. "It's strange, isn't it?" Jake mused, kicking a loose stone along the tracks. "How we find solace in these forgotten places. It's like they understand our pain." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. There's something comforting about being surrounded by decay. It reminds us that even the most beautiful things can fall apart, and that's okay. We spent hours exploring the railway station, finding beauty in its desolation. The sunlight filtered through broken windows, casting intricate patterns on the cracked floor. It was in moments like these that I felt a sense of peace, a connection to something greater than myself. Over time, our explorations took us to various parts of the city. We climbed rooftops, delved into underground tunnels, and uncovered hidden gems that had been forgotten by the world. Each adventure brought us closer, and our friendship deepened. One day, as we were exploring an old theater, Jake turned to me with a serious expression. "Mark, have you ever thought about documenting our explorations? Not just with photos, but with stories, videos, maybe even a blog?" The idea intrigued me. I had always enjoyed capturing the essence of these places through my art, but documenting our adventures in a more comprehensive way could be a new and exciting challenge. I think it's a great idea, I said, feeling a spark of enthusiasm. It could be a way to share our journey with others, to show them the beauty in decay. With Jake's encouragement, we set out to create a blog dedicated to our urban explorations. We called it Forgotten Echoes, a name that encapsulated our mission to uncover and preserve the stories of the city's abandoned places. The process was exhilarating. We spent hours writing, editing videos, and curating photos, pouring our hearts into the project. As the blog gained traction, we started receiving messages from people who resonated with our stories. Some shared their own experiences of loss and healing, while others expressed gratitude for shedding light on the beauty of forgotten places. The sense of community that formed around Forgotten Echoes was incredible, and it gave me a renewed sense of purpose. One evening, as we were working on a new post, Jake suggested we organize a meetup for our followers. It could be a way to bring people together, he said, his eyes alight with excitement. We could explore a location together, share stories, and connect in person. The idea was both thrilling and daunting. Hosting a meetup meant opening up our private world to strangers, but it also presented an opportunity to build a supportive community. We decided to give it a try, choosing an old factory as the location for our first event. On the day of the meetup, I felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. As people started to arrive, I was struck by the diversity of our group. There were seasoned urban explorers, curious newcomers, and individuals who had found solace in our blog during difficult times. Each person brought their own unique perspective, and the atmosphere buzzed with energy and excitement. We spent the day exploring the factory, sharing stories and discoveries. There was a palpable sense of camaraderie, a feeling that we were all part of something bigger than ourselves. It was incredibly rewarding to see how our passion for urban exploration had brought people together, fostering connections and creating a space for healing. As the sun began to set, we gathered in a circle to reflect on the day's experiences. One by one, people shared what had drawn them to urban exploration and how it had impacted their lives. The stories were deeply moving, and I realized that Forgotten Echoes had become more than just a blog. It was a source of inspiration and support for many. After the meetup, Jake and I continued to organize regular events, each one strengthening the bonds within our community. We also expanded the blog, adding sections for guest posts and collaborations. The more we shared, the more we learned about the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of preserving the stories of the past. Through it all, my relationship with Jake grew stronger. He had become a true friend, someone I could rely on and trust. His unwavering support and understanding helped me heal, and I hoped I had done the same for him. Together, we had turned our pain into something beautiful, using our passion for urban exploration to build a community that celebrated the beauty in decay. One day, while exploring a particularly decrepit building, Jake turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Mark, I think we found our new beginning. This journey, this community, it's what we've been searching for." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "You're right, Jake. We've turned our past into something meaningful. And who knows what other stories we'll uncover along the way." As we continued our exploration, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was no longer alone. With Jake and our growing community by my side, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, we would continue to explore, create, and heal, finding strength in our shared experiences and the beauty of the forgotten places that had brought us together. The transformation of my life had been slow and steady, marked by small victories and moments of profound clarity. The culmination of this journey was the art exhibition, a milestone that symbolized not just my recovery but also my rebirth. After months of preparation, the night had finally arrived. The studio had been transformed into a gallery, each piece meticulously arranged to tell a part of my story. The sculptures, made from materials I had collected during my explorations, stood as silent witnesses to my journey through pain and healing. The walls were adorned with photographs and sketches, capturing the beauty of decay and renewal. As the first guests began to arrive, a mix of excitement and nervousness bubbled within me. This was the moment I had worked towards, the chance to share my story with the world. Mr. Grayson, ever the supportive mentor, was there to offer words of encouragement. "You've done something remarkable here, Mark," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "Tonight is a celebration of your resilience." The gallery quickly filled with people, friends, fellow urban explorers, art enthusiasts, and even some who had stumbled upon the event by chance. Among them was Jake, whose unwavering support had been a cornerstone of my recovery. His presence was a comforting reminder that I was not alone in this journey. As I mingled with the guests, I was struck by the diversity of those who had come to see my work. Some were drawn by their own love of urban exploration, others by a curiosity about the stories embedded in the sculptures. Conversations buzzed around me, filled with admiration and intrigue. At the center of the room stood a large sculpture I had named Resilience. It was a towering piece made from twisted metal and shattered glass, symbolizing the strength it takes to rebuild after devastation. It was the heart of the exhibition, a testament to the transformative power of art and the human spirit. As the evening progressed, I prepared to give a speech. The thought of speaking in front of so many people was daunting, but I knew it was necessary. This was my story, and it was time to own it. I stepped onto a small stage, and the room fell silent, all eyes turning towards me. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice steady despite the flutter of nerves. "This exhibition is not just about art. It's about a journey through pain, loss, and ultimately, healing." I spoke about my passion for urban exploration, how it had started as a hobby and evolved into a lifeline. I shared the story of Clara's betrayal, the deep sense of loss that had driven me to seek solace in forgotten places. As I spoke, I felt a connection with the audience, a shared understanding of the struggles we all face. "Each piece in this exhibition tells a part of my story," I continued. "But it's also a story that many of you might relate to. It's about finding beauty in decay, strength in vulnerability, and hope in the darkest of times." When I finished, the room erupted in applause. The sound was overwhelming, but it filled me with a sense of validation and closure. I had bared my soul to these strangers, and in return, they had given me their acceptance and support. After the speech, people approached me, sharing their own stories of loss and resilience. It was heartening to see how my work had resonated with them, sparking conversations about healing and transformation. Among the crowd was a woman named Laura, who had recently lost her husband. She spoke about how the exhibition had given her hope, a reminder that there was beauty to be found even in the most difficult times. "Your art speaks to me," she said, her eyes filled with tears. "It's a reminder that we're not alone in our pain, and that we can find strength in each other." Her words touched me deeply, reaffirming the purpose of my work. This exhibition was more than just a personal achievement. It was a bridge, connecting people through shared experiences and emotions. As the night drew to a close, I stood back and watched as the guests continued to explore the gallery. The sculptures, once symbols of my pain, had become beacons of hope and resilience. The conversations, the connections, the shared stories, they were all part of a larger tapestry, woven from the threads of our collective experiences. Jake found me towards the end of the evening, a wide smile on his face. "You did it, Mark," he said, clapping me on the back. "This is incredible. Look at all these people, all these stories. You've created something truly special." "Thank you, Jake," I replied, feeling a swell of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you." As we stood there, I realized that this exhibition was not just the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of a new one. I had found my voice through art, my strength through community, and my purpose through the stories I had uncovered. Leaving the gallery that night, I felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. The path ahead was still uncertain, but I was no longer afraid. I had faced my pain, embraced my journey, and found a way to transform it into something beautiful. The city's forgotten places had given me a new lease on life, and I was determined to continue exploring, creating, and connecting. With each new adventure, I would uncover more stories, more hidden gems, and more reasons to celebrate the resilience of the human spirit. As the lights dimmed and the last guests departed, I took one final look at the gallery. The art, the stories, the connections. They were all part of a journey that was far from over. And with a heart full of hope and determination, I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The success of the art exhibition had given me a sense of closure, but there was still one unresolved part of my journey: Clara. Her betrayal had left deep scars, and though I had made significant strides in healing, I knew that confronting her one last time was necessary for me to fully move forward. I reached out to Clara, suggesting we meet at a small cafe we used to frequent. It was a neutral ground, a place that held memories of better times. She agreed, and we set a date for the following week. As the day approached, I felt a mix of apprehension and resolve. This conversation was crucial for both of us to find closure and understanding. The cafe was quiet when I arrived, the soft hum of conversations blending with the clinking of cups and saucers. I chose a table by the window, giving me a view of the street outside. It wasn't long before Clara walked in, her eyes scanning the room until they met mine. She looked nervous, and I could see the strain of the past months etched on her face. "Hi, Mark," she greeted me, her voice tentative.
Hi, Clara, I replied, gesturing for her tog sit.
We sat in awkward silence for a few moments, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. Finally, I broke the silence. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," I began. "I think we both need this conversation." She nodded, looking down at her hands. "I agree. There's a lot we need to say." I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "Clara, I want to understand why. Why did you feel the need to lead a double life? Why didn't you come to me with your struggles?" Her eyes filled with tears as she looked up at me. "Mark, I was lost. After the accident, I never fully recovered. I threw myself into my work to escape the pain, and somewhere along the way, I lost sight of who I was. Meeting Tom and getting involved with the society, it was an escape, a way to feel alive again." "I understand the need to escape," I said softly, "but why didn't you trust me enough to share that with me? We could have faced it together." She wiped a tear from her cheek. "I was afraid, Mark. Afraid that you would see me as weak, that you would judge me for not being able to move on. I thought I had to be strong for both of us, but in doing so, I pushed you away." Her words hit me hard, and I realized that we had both been victims of our own fears and insecurities. "Clara, I never wanted you to be perfect. I just wanted you to be honest with me. We could have found a way through it together." She nodded, her expression one of deep regret. "I know that now. I'm so sorry for the pain I caused you. I never meant to hurt you, but I know that doesn't change what happened." For a moment, we sat in silence, the gravity of our conversation sinking in. Then I spoke again. "Clara, I found a way to move forward. Urban exploration, my art, it's helped me heal. I've met people who understand and support me. But I need to ask you one more thing. Was Tom just an escape, or was there more to it?" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Tom was complicated. It started as an escape, but there were moments when I thought it could be more. But ultimately, it wasn't about him. It was about me trying to find a way to cope with everything I was feeling." Her honesty was painful but necessary. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "I needed to hear that." She reached across the table, her hand resting on mine. "Mark, I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me one day. Not for me, but for yourself. You deserve to be free of this pain." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. Forgiveness had never been easy for me, but I knew she was right. Holding on to the pain would only keep me trapped in the past. "I'll try," I said finally, "but forgiveness takes time. For now, I just want to focus on moving forward." She nodded, understanding. "I hope you find the happiness you deserve, Mark. You're a good person, and you've done amazing things with your art. I'm proud of you." Hearing those words was bittersweet. We had once shared a life and a love that felt unbreakable, but now we were both different people, shaped by our experiences and choices. It was time to let go of the past and embrace the future, whatever it might hold. As we left the cafe, I felt a sense of relief. The conversation had been difficult, but it had also been necessary. I had confronted the pain and found a way to understand it, to see it from a different perspective. Clara and I parted ways, knowing that while our chapter together was over, it had helped shape who we were today. Walking back to my car, I felt a lightness in my step. The city, with all its forgotten places and hidden stories, had given me a new purpose. I had turned my pain into art, built a community of fellow explorers, and found strength in my journey. That night, I returned to my studio, feeling a renewed sense of determination. There were still so many stories to uncover, so much beauty to find in the decay. And as long as I kept exploring, creating, and connecting, I knew I would continue to heal and grow. The path ahead was still uncertain, but I was no longer afraid. I had faced my demons, embraced my journey, and found a way to transform my pain into something beautiful. With each new exploration, I would uncover more stories, more hidden gems, and more reasons to celebrate the resilience of the human spirit. As I picked up my tools and began to work on a new piece, I felt a sense of peace. The past was behind me, and the future was a canvas waiting to be filled. And with every stroke, every weld, and every creation, I would continue to write my story, one filled with hope, resilience, and the enduring beauty of the human soul. The confrontation with Clara had given me the closure I needed, but it also left me with a profound sense of finality. It was the end of a significant chapter in my life, and as I walked away from that cafe, I felt a mix of relief and melancholy. I had faced my past, but now it was time to look to the future. With a clearer mind, I threw myself back into my passions. Urban exploration and art had become my lifelines, but now they were more than that. They were my purpose. Jake and I continued to document our adventures for Forgotten Echoes, and the blog's community grew steadily. The connections we made through our stories were both humbling and inspiring. One morning, as I was sorting through emails from our readers, I received an invitation that piqued my interest. It was from a curator at a renowned art gallery in New York City. She had seen my work online and was interested in featuring it in an upcoming exhibition focused on urban decay and renewal. Excitement and nervousness washed over me as I read the email. This was a huge opportunity, a chance to bring my art to a broader audience and share the stories of the city's forgotten places on a larger stage. I immediately called Jake to share the news. "Jake, you won't believe this," I said, my voice barely containing my excitement. "We've been invited to exhibit at a gallery in New York."
Jacques entuziasm matke mine.
"That's incredible, Mark. Your work deserves this kind of recognition. We have to make this happen." Over the next few weeks, we prepared for the exhibition. We selected pieces that best represented the journey of decay and renewal, each one telling a unique story. The preparations were intense, but they also solidified my commitment to this path. I was ready to take my art and our mission to the next level. The day of the exhibition arrived, and Jake and I traveled to New York, our excitement palpable. The gallery was located in a historic building, its own architecture a testament to the themes of transformation and resilience. As we set up the pieces, I felt a mix of pride and nervous anticipation. The opening night was a whirlwind. The gallery was filled with art enthusiasts, critics, and fellow artists. The response to my work was overwhelmingly positive, and I found myself engaged in conversations about the stories behind each piece. It was a surreal experience, seeing my journey reflected in the eyes of strangers who connected with the emotions and themes of my art. One of the highlights of the evening was meeting the curator, Emily. She was passionate about urban art and had a deep appreciation for the narratives embedded in my work. "Your pieces tell such powerful stories, Mark," she said. "They capture the essence of resilience in a way that's both personal and universal." Her words were validating, and as the night progressed, I realized how far I had come. From the depths of heartbreak and betrayal, I had found a way to transform my pain into something beautiful and meaningful. The connections I made that night reaffirmed my belief in the power of art to heal and inspire. As the exhibition continued, I received offers for future collaborations and exhibitions. It was an exciting prospect, but it also meant that I needed to consider how to balance these opportunities with my love for urban exploration. I discussed this with Jake, and together, we came up with a plan to continue our adventures while also embracing these new opportunities. Returning home, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The New York exhibition had opened doors I hadn't even known existed, and I was eager to see where they would lead. But it also made me appreciate the roots of my journey, the forgotten places of my own city and the stories they held. Jake and I decided to celebrate our success by organizing a special event for our Forgotten Echoes community. We planned a large-scale exploration of a massive, abandoned shipyard that had recently come onto our radar. It was a site rich with history and potential stories, a perfect place to reconnect with our local community. The event was a resounding success. Dozens of people joined us, each one bringing their own perspective and experiences. We spent the day exploring the shipyard, discovering hidden corners and sharing stories. The camaraderie and shared sense of adventure reminded me of why I had started this journey in the first place. During a quiet moment, as the sun set over the rusting hulks of old ships, Jake turned to me. "Mark, look at what we've built. This community, this sense of purpose, it's incredible. We've turned our pain into something that inspires and connects people. I'm proud of us." His words resonated deeply. We had indeed built something special, and the journey was far from over. The future held endless possibilities, and I was ready to embrace them all. As we packed up and prepared to leave the shipyard, I looked around at the faces of the people who had joined us. Each one had their own story, their own reasons for being there. And in that moment, I realized that our work was about more than just exploring and documenting. It was about creating a space for healing and connection. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was no longer daunted by it. With each new adventure, each piece of art, and each connection made, I would continue to find meaning and purpose. The forgotten places of the city had given me a new lease on life, and I was determined to honor that gift by sharing it with others. As Jake and I walked away from the shipyard, I felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. The journey had been long and arduous, but it had also been profoundly rewarding. And with each step forward, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be, exploring, creating, and connecting, one forgotten place at a time.